Hezbollah has suffered the most significant setback in its 40-year plus history. And I think it and Iran will respond in a cautious rather than provocative manner, at least for the near term. But I go back to the previous word or words, compliance and enforcement. That's what it's all about.
Now, thousands of people are returning to southern Lebanon after the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. The Israeli government spokesperson David Mencer warned Hezbollah that Israel will respond forcefully to any violation of this agreement.
The agreement in Lebanon came into effect this morning. From Israel's perspective, we certainly will adhere to the agreement, as the Prime Minister has made very clear. The length of the ceasefire depends on what happens in Lebanon. We will adhere to the agreement, but we will also enforcement. The key is enforcement. That's where these agreements have fallen in the past, enforcement. We will respond forcefully to any violation. With the US's full understanding, Israel maintains full freedom of military action. So if Hezbollah violates the agreement and tries to again rearm itself, we will defend ourselves.
That is the Israeli government spokesperson, David Mencer. Well, as I speak, that ceasefire is holding, and so many people are going back to their homes in southern Lebanon. Will it hold, though? Will it continue to hold? And what impact will it have on the wider conflict in the region? David Satterfield is an American diplomat who has served extensively in the Middle East, including as US ambassador to Turkey and Lebanon. He was most recently special envoy for Middle East humanitarian issues between October of 2023 and April of this year. David Satterfield, good afternoon from us in London. Do you think this is a pretty significant achievement, this ceasefire deal, and are you confident it will hold?
It is a very significant achievement, both for the people of Israel as well as for the people of Lebanon. Can it hold? The answer is yes, it certainly can. And I'll put a note of optimism, but cautious optimism, into this. It can hold if Hezbollah does not attempt, as it has done in the past, to violate the terms of the agreement and to rearm and to move forces south of the Litani River. If Hezbollah abides by the terms, then this can be an enduring arrangement which will allow a return to normalcy. Better than normalcy. It'll be a better situation for those in northern Israel and the inhabitants of southern Israel and Beirut, but it all depends upon the issue of enforcement and compliance by Hezbollah.
Now, who do you credit with getting this agreement? And let's hope, by the way, that it does hold. Is it the Biden administration? Is it Antony Blinken? Or is it the threat of Donald Trump? What is it?
It is, of course, the Biden administration. It is the tireless efforts over many, many months by a special envoy, Amos Hochstein. It is the efforts by Secretary Blinken, by the president himself, engaging with the leaders on all sides. They deserve the credit for this. I cannot speculate on impact of administrations to be or the results of the last election, but I will say this as a diplomat who is engaged on these issues exactly. It is this administration's efforts, tireless efforts, and the consequence of the Israeli actions taken on the ground, the kinetic actions, the dismantlement of the Hezbollah terrorist leadership, the kinetic actions to uproot and destroy Hezbollah's military forces in the south along the northern Israeli border. Those are the factors responsible here.
But Hezbollah, you're right, obviously, to point to the fact that the leadership has gone. Mossad certainly made many would say, an incredibly efficient job of that. That was quite the operation. But they will regroup. They haven't really gone away, have they? And presumably they will also rearm.
Well, let's look at the difference here, because I think it's valuable, between the situation in Lebanon and this ceasefire and the still elusive ceasefire in Gaza, the situation there. The difference always has been that the goals in Lebanon were extremely finite, defined, and achievable. It was not the elimination of Hezbollah, terrorist organization that it is, or indeed its complete disarmament. It was the compliance by Hezbollah with provisions of a UN Security Council resolution, 1701, passed in August of 2006 to withdraw its forces north of the Litani, not to come south, and to cease the rocketing of Israel, which Hezbollah began without provocation on October 8th. Those were always achievable goals. Will Hezbollah attempt to increase its armaments? I have no doubt there will be an effort in that direction. But there will be consequences if that happens. But Hezbollah has suffered the most significant setback in its 40-year plus history. And I think it and Iran will respond in a cautious rather than provocative manner, at least for the near term. But I go back to the previous word or words, compliance and enforcement. That's what it's all about.
Right. And all this, of course, will be keenly watched by Hamas and indeed other organisations operating in the West Bank and Gaza. And I wonder how you think it will have gone down.
That's a very important question. And it's not clear yet. This cannot be, any of this, good news for the Hamas leadership in the tunnels of Gaza. There has been now a decoupling between the campaign launched by Hezbollah, by Iran behind it, against Israel, ostensibly in support of Hamas in Gaza. That's ended now, and we hope stays ended. What does Hamas calculate from that? Do they conclude that now is the time to respond to a ceasefire with hostage release deal that has been presented to them now by Egypt, the United States, and Qatar for over 2 months, going on 3 now? If they do, there can be a negotiation that leads to that ceasefire in Gaza as well. But I would be very, very reluctant to opine on the calculations of the leaders of Hamas in those tunnels in Gaza. One can only hope they draw obvious and proper conclusions from this.
Right. But surely it is unrealistic to think that Hamas won't add into their thinking the prospect of Donald Trump in the White House. They will, won't they?
Well, I think it's a reality which all parties in the region and the world have to factor in right now. But I think for Hamas, their calculus is a bit more complex than just the U.S. factor. Do they believe that in the end they can attrit Israeli capacity to fight, that they can attrit international will to support Israel? And if so, are they willing to continue this indefinitely? They've certainly shown a willingness to allow Palestinians in Gaza to suffer and to die without limit. Has that changed? That is not a judgment that I can make now. I would encourage extreme caution here and controlled enthusiasm, if I may use the term, with respect to Hamas drawing the right lessons from what has happened. But all that said, it is the moment for a further intensified push with Egypt, with Qatar, with Turkey, to see whether or not Hamas is in fact working on a different set of calculations, is willing now to negotiate that hostage release and ceasefire agreement it has refused to respond to for many months now.
Thank you very much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it. David Satterfield, who is an American diplomat, had served extensively in the Middle East.